welcome to your daily game face. I'm Dr. Kim Lannon. I'm here with Lou.
Hi.
Hi, Lou. Lou didn't miss me.
I did miss you.
No, this is
Up until this process started.
Then you realized how much you really didn't miss me because it starts. Well, I did not get the fanfare welcome that I expected.
I have multiple fires going on right now.
You know, this is a you issue, not a me issue. So don't let it leak into my show.
Okay.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome back to me.
I missed you.
Oh, yeah, really?
I did.
I'm going to try to go away longer next time so that we'll see really if it really counts. Because I don't know.
Don't do
I walked
that.
in, you were just like, you didn't even look up from your phone.
No, I was on the laptop because I have several fires going on right now. Several major fires.
Major?
Yes.
Well, are they having to do with my show?
No.
Good. Okay.
That was all set for your show.
No, actually, my screen was black when I walked in, which is why we're late.
It's not black now, is it?
No.
All right.
It's perfect now.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm back and Lou has informed me that he will be out next week. So we have to try to find a new time so that I can do another show because we can't miss shows. I was on a roll.
Just missed the show last week.
I know. Well, so interesting thing. We had it scheduled. And so it gets very confusing. I have to say, yeah, don't listen to him.
Yeah.
He's another one.
Yeah.
Okay. So don't mind him.
I get you, John. I get you.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
So when we were going to do the show last week, here's a really weird, I know that people will find it fine if they've done this before. So I was on one side of Mexico last week. So now I can say where I was because I'm back. But I was on one side of Mexico in the middle of the front part of the week. But it jumped time zones multiple times. I know this sounds like, what? Weird. So, and I was on a ship. So I was in Eastern Standard Time, but then I was in Central, but then I was in Mountain, but the ship stayed on Central Time. And although off the ship, I was in Mountain Time.
You got to Mountain?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I was in Central Time on the ship, and you had to be back on the ship on ship's time. But every time we were moving, the clocks on the phones and your watches kept resetting. So it was so confusing.
I can't even imagine.
When we were supposed to do our show, it was really hard to get that linked up for it to be the right time. So I said, forget it. It's not working. And also, I mean, the internet was fine, sort of, but it was also, it was a weird thing because I'd never had this happen before because when we were switching zones, if you were on the ship, it was free Wi-Fi. Even though I have international unlimited plan, I have to talk to my carrier because they charged me $74. When I was talking off the ship or doing anything off the ship, just whatever.
Yeah.
So it, first world problems, but nonetheless, I couldn't do my show like we planned last week because although I was in one time zone, I was in another one at the same time. So I was in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. That would screw me up so badly.
It was so confusing. So every day I did about 5 or 6 miles or more on the ship deck, right? In the morning early. Mm-hmm. And I would bump into, all the officers. That's when they all come out, like all the officers, because no one's up except for me doing something crazy on the ship deck, running or walking or whatever. And I would ask people, I'm like, the officers, they'd be watching us sail along or whatever. And they'd be like, what time do you have? And they would every day they would, change a ship time to the right time on all the clocks, but I would never trust it. So we were manually, you can override your Apple phone to manually set it. So it got manually set, but then people I was traveling with, their phone, even though it was manually set, was forced setting itself back to what it was. So,
what a nightmare.
So when we were out off the ship on the day that was really a big thing, we were in panic mode to get back on time because they will leave you.
Yeah. Oh,
they will leave you on the pier. And we were in this one spot where this place, the pier was 4 miles long and you had to take a shuttle because it was on like a naval base. So in order to get on and off the pier, you had to go through this gate with lots of people with guns. It was just,
wow.
It was on the one side of Mexico.
Wow. 4 miles of pier. Huh?
It was a 4 mile pier.
Wow.
It was concrete hell.
Good Lord.
I could feel the heat radiating off the concrete through the bus that we had to take to get on and off the pier.
just that twice a year we do it here just drives me absolutely nuts. I can't imagine doing it like 3 or 4 times in a week.
It was very odd. I had
Yeah.
never, and I've been many places, and I've never had to do that.
Yeah.
And then have to keep track. And it was, yeah. But I learned this time, because I'll probably go back in that area again. I've learned how to now navigate this.
Okay.
But it was really stressful. And, making sure I didn't, because in my head, I'm like, how do I fly to the next port? But I wouldn't have to. I could go in a very dangerous ride in a car across the whole country to get to the port the next day. I might have met the ship. I even thought about that. I'm like, how could I get there fast?
Oh, you had a contingency plan.
I did, in case.
The ship should have an app with the ship
It
time.
does. It does.
Okay.
It does have an app with ship's time. But that was
That changed?
Yeah, because it stayed on ship's time, but when you got off the ship, it moved, and because of where we were, so it was really weird, and that's why. So I put it in my comments back on the survey that the ship's time changed to
in the app
to the wrong time, and my phone time stayed the right time. So my phone stayed the right time, and people I was with, their phone, it didn't. So I kept the time.
Did anybody get left behind? Do we know?
You know how usually you can see people running because, right?
Yes.
On this one, I couldn't tell if anyone was running or not because the pier was so long, and right.
They could have been 4 miles away.
They could have been in East Bumshoe, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known. However, we got back on time, and I will say that there were 2 women on deck 2, right? I know this because they announce your shame and humiliation, so they announce you. They call out your name 10 minutes or 5 minutes before you're about to sail, saying they're looking for you.
Yeah.
And so everyone, of course, on the pool deck, because I was at the pool deck, everyone was like, "Oh no!"
Yeah.
But then 10 minutes later, the captain came on and said, "All on board. All's good." So we left, but those 2 went, so they must have been the runners, but I don't think that they were running the 4-mile pier. I think they were running the short version from the port little shopping area, but couldn't see them because it was just too long.
Running in their flip-flops.
Yes, It was quite something. So anyway, it was very interesting. It made for a vacation day of stress. And I didn't leave the ship. We didn't leave the ship on that day till later in the morning because it docked early, and I decided I would, do my exercise, get a massage, and it was a short day. But had I known how difficult it was going to be to get on and off the ship at that port, I would have not done that in that order.
Yeah.
I would have. So I learned my lesson, and I had never done that port before. So,
all right.
And people are going to say, "What port is that?" Figure it out yourself. Go and figure that one out yourself. But anyway, so I'm back, and I'm thrilled.
Did you miss me?
Of course I did. I was thinking about what we were going to talk about today, and thinking, oh, this will be an interesting day. But it's actually going to be a good day.
Okay, good.
It was like Lou's anticipating, like, what are we talking about today? Lou, the topic of the day. Mm-hmm. Ready? I have it. I'm so excited because I actually found a couple of my old professors from my undergrad. They've been publishing a lot lately because they're now they're doing their sort of after full professorship. They're doing the emeritus, stuff. So they're publishing a lot more. So I'm finding lots of articles about subjects that I love anyway, that I talk about in general in my practice, but also in life. And one of my favorite, Susan Krauss Whitbourne, she is one of my faves from college. And she's published up a lot in the past couple of years. And I'm so excited because when I was looking up some stuff just on stats to make sure, I like to be accurate, I was like, oh my God, she's just writing up a ton. So it made me think, I should reach out to her. She probably doesn't remember me because I was in 3 of her classes that had like 400 people in them. But
yeah, sure.
But nonetheless, I thought I would talk today about, because this is a time of people going to college for their first time.
Yeah.
My lovely niece is going to her college this week, and I'm excited.
Her first trip?
This is her first trip.
Yep.
She got a full ride, and she's going to Wheaton.
Oh, nice.
And she's going to become a nurse practitioner.
Okay.
And I'm very excited for her because I said, good, get that degree so you can come work for me. She didn't work with kids though. So, I only go down to age 6.
Why did she get a full ride?
Why? Because
Yeah.
she's super smart.
Oh,
Good morning, B. She is super. Why did she get a full ride?
Yeah, yeah.
well,
I mean, athletic scholarship,
oh, no.
academic
Smart.
scholarship. Okay, excellent.
Smart.
Even better.
I should say that it wasn't like the entire thing. It's almost the entire
Okay.
thing. It's like I think maybe the room and board wasn't there or something. I just know the academic piece was covered.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
that piece.
Yep.
So yeah. So I'm excited about that for her because it's close by. Well, it's like an hour and a half. No, an hour and 20. And it's a great college. Love it. And I'm excited because I do want her to come work for me. I'm like, get that degree fast so we can get this
Yep.
going. But it will be fun and I'm excited for it. But this is the time of year where like everyone, like I've already got students who are in my practice have gone off to college for their first year or have gone back for their third or fourth or, graduating. So I'm very excited about that. B saying hi to John.
Yep.
B, don't talk to John.
Why not?
And so I have been imparting lots of things to them as they go, but also just the fact that it's such an important thing for people to be assertive because high school is so much different than college. And I'm not going to talk about high schoolers versus college right now. She's laughing. I'm more talking about just the fact that having the skill of being assertive in life is so important. And the lack of self-advocacy in people still surprises me and amazes me. And it doesn't really, it surprised me and amazed me how much in this day and age we lack still that piece
Right.
of being able to do that and having self-agency, being able to just say, this is how I think, this is how I feel. But people are so afraid of having the self, I guess saying, hey, I actually feel this way, or this makes me feel this way, or you make me feel this way, or this situation makes me feel this way. But then feeling like they can't say it because they don't want to upset the person or they don't want to upset the situation more because they don't really know how to say what they need to say. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit is whether it's in healthcare situations, going off to college, now you're going into, high school, people are taught don't talk back, don't speak up. Conform, right? And I always teach my clients that are kids coming up through is like, you absolutely can do that. You can absolutely speak up. You don't talk back, but speaking up is not talking back. And a lot of adults, unfortunately, in my experience with some of these teenagers I've had that are very good at speaking up, don't like to be challenged, and
Right.
therefore they will say you're speaking back and then send them to the principal, or they'll have these conversations, or they'll retaliate grade wise. And I've tried to assure that most professors in college do not do that, that they are there to have the critical thinking skills be challenged. And, as a professor myself, I love questions. I love talking to my students. I love having the dialogue. I love having someone tell me something different that I already thought I knew, but I don't. And they've given me other information. Like, I just love that because I think that's a great learning process. A lot of people aren't like that. As you know, right? And
Yep.
so, and especially high school. So whether it's high school to college transition, or if it's in your workplace, your relationship, healthcare, which is a big one, healthcare,
Yep.
people still, even, younger generations, even coming up through, still don't speak up for their healthcare. And it was interesting that I was reading an article last week about a woman. I was reading stuff on self-advocacy just in general. But this woman back last year, she had gone into the emergency room. An emergency room, obviously it's cute, right? So, the emergency room doctors are there to like get you quick, figure it out and get you out the door essentially.
Yep.
Not that it's quick. So this woman went in, she had a really bad migraine, terrible migraine. Now I've heard these stories before. This is a story that was not personal to me, but I read it and I was like, oh, this is so indicative of this problem. She went in, they immediately said, oh, it's a migraine. You're having just a migraine, younger woman, late 20s, early 30s. She gets medication for it. She goes home a couple days later. She is in massive pain. She knows that something's wrong. So she goes back to the same emergency room, same doctor, whatever. The doctor fights her on the fact, he's like, it's just a migraine, and wants to pass it off. And she had the ability, and this is where assertiveness is the core of emotional intelligence, being emotionally intelligent to be able to know yourself, to know a situation. Even if you're wrong, you'd rather be advocating for yourself than not. So she advocated for herself hard to have a CAT scan and said, I'm not leaving here. I want it. I deserve it. I'm paying my insurance. I want it. There's something wrong. And lo and behold, thank God she did it, because the doctor apparently didn't want to do it. And it was, I say he because it was also an article wrapped around how women have a harder time getting heard around these things. He ended up bypassing it to somebody else because he pushed it off. She ended up getting the CAT scan. They found like a shadow, and then it went to an MRI within the same time frame. It was a massive blood clot in her brain. Wow. And so had she not advocated for herself, the likelihood statistically in this article was that she would have been dead, because it would have ruptured. She would, had it gone that way, so there's extremes, right? But I use the extreme example because it's important to people, because things get missed. It could be the difference. Like I use the high school comparison to college. That's the difference between someone potentially getting an F because a teacher didn't like them because they challenged them, versus an A that they had because, that's just the way it goes, right? They had an A, but the teacher didn't like them and they didn't advocate because they're afraid, right? And that happens, that retaliatory sort of thing. Or in healthcare, people don't listen necessarily. I have several clients in my office that when they go for their annuals, their yearlies, I often will make a call to the office to talk to the primary before they go in, to make sure that because they're good at being advocates, but because of sometimes their gender, and not just female, but their gender, their age, and their race gets in the way of the doctor's thought process, which you would think in this day and age it wouldn't, but it actually does. So I make sure that I at least put out an advocacy piece of an email or a follow-up phone call to say, this is what's been going on. Please address this. And for some reason, it seems to help more than just the person being able to advocate, because I have one client in particular advocates really great for herself. And then I have a man that really is amazing at advocating for himself, and she doesn't really get heard. He doesn't get heard. And it's such an interesting thing of why it happens. Hers is clearly, I know hers is gender and race issue for sure. And so we have switched primary cares due to that, because we found a better fit for her. Now, the man who has the same problem, he ends up advocating for himself, but he's been with the primary care so long and he feels so obligated to him that he feels like he can't question him because the doctor will kick back on him and say, no, you're wrong. And so then what he ends up doing is coming back to me and then bouncing all the questions that he needed answered off of the doctor, off of him to me. And then I have to do do an advocacy build in between. And then it glues itself back together, but it's more about that fact. In that case, he's not being heard because there's that old school, old fashioned, like, don't question me thing. And so there's lots of different things. I'm just using different examples of like how you don't necessarily get heard. So for all those kids that are going from high school into college, be critical thinkers, challenge appropriately. And how do you do that? You find a way, and this is in any scenario, you find a way that you're in the emotional intelligence range. Be emotionally intelligent to know that I have a thought, I have a feeling, and I know that you have a thought and you have a feeling. And I'm not going to override you or step on you or be mean to you or cajole you or twist your arm, but I want to make sure I get heard because I have a thought or an idea, knowing that the other person also does too. And the goal, and this is so hard for my clients, the goal isn't always to get to a resolve, because if two sides are there and the resolve isn't in the same goal, that doesn't mean you can't have resolve. It means that you can come to a middle ground, which in psychology, we call it like the Goldilocks area, sort of like the happy medium. But people fight for the right fight. They're right, the other person. And so if you go into it in an aggressive way, that's not going to work. And if you go into it passively, obviously that's not going to work. And if the other person's either of those things with you, you're just like magnets moving away from each other because you've been demagnetized from each other, right?
Well, so this is the important point about self-advocacy, isn't it? Often it's about approach.
Yes.
And finding the right approach, because the right approach isn't the same for each situation and each individual. And,
right.
You can do it. If you don't modify your approach, you're going to run into problems. You're just going to run yourself into walls.
Right. And it's not necessarily, so modified, not meaning compromise
No.
your integrity, which people will often do because they don't want to rock the boat. So they'll not modify it in the accurate way to still advocate for themselves. So modifying does not mean it's not even compromise. It's compromising your position. You don't have to you can compromise and negotiate, but it doesn't mean compromising your integrity because the other person is more strong or you don't know how to navigate their opinion. If you stick to your own truth, if you stick to your own facts and you stay to that, then the resolve doesn't come in changing the other person. It comes in, can we mutually come to some respectful agreement on how to just sit with this and then be able to manage it?
Well, job one is managing a discussion instead of a conflict.
Right.
Over.
But people work really hard to just get it, the resolve as in the end point, as in like, okay, we put a bow around it and now it's never going to be there. It's like, well, no. That's not how it usually works. It's about, here's where you sit, here's where I sit. And if things don't move, we're going to keep it this space. But if we work together, partner, and we go towards the center goal of, okay, we want something solution, we want something that works, then it will work better. So in the case of the woman I described at the beginning of like her advocacy, she found a way to stay in her space, advocated for herself, saying, I can't leave. She didn't get police escort. She just said, I cannot leave here knowing that I know in my body something's wrong and you're not listening to me. Right. And that happens. I hear those stories multiple times a year in my practice about feeling like people don't get heard in their doctor sector of whatever is going on. I hear it a lot in my older patients, feeling like that their doctors just don't listen. They listen, but they just, kind of chalk it up to, well, you're old, that they come in with that ageism of, well, you're older, it's probably this, like, it's not even out of educated knowledge. It's more of like, it's probably because you're older. Well, how about we actually look? How about we do some blood work? How about we run a test? How about you got the insurance? Why don't we run a CT scan or an MRI? Obviously insurance companies balk at these things to authorize and all that. And it also takes time. But there's a lot of payout for people to like advocate for themselves to do that. So I think healthcare is one of the reasons why people avoid healthcare and not getting healthcare and not going to see somebody. I just had another story, not from a patient directly, but their family member passed away at age 36 because they had a cardiac issue. And this is one of the things that made me look up Susan Krauss Whitborn. I didn't look her up, but she happened to write an article on the fact that they did this study about young women who get passed over because men are more likely to have cardiac issues, and women tend to get ignored more, especially in their youth, their 20s, 30s, 40s, because they're women and they tend not to, by statistics, have this problem. And we've learned over multiple newer diagnoses of like ovarian cancer, breast cancer, I think that they're happening younger and younger, HPV cancers, right? So in women, this study that came out just recently about this, and if people want to know the journal, I can give it to you. I can give you the reference, about the cardiac issues that women often get bypassed for cardiac issues as anxiety, or it's that old school, like it's neurotic, it's the hysterical woman. She does, right? But no, it's a cardiac issue. And how do you advocate for that? And you advocate for it by saying like, hey, if you don't, you have to be not fearful of the fact that if you say to the doctor, I don't feel like that you're hearing my concern, I want to have someone else look at me. Now, people get scared of saying that because they feel like they're going to upset that person, and then that person's going to then jade the next person, all that stuff. And I'm always telling people, get the second opinion, get a third opinion. If it's not sitting well with you and you still feel it. Now, that doesn't work very well with people who have hypochondriacal symptoms, right? So when people are hypochondriacs, which there are people, like every symptom means something. Everything's, they're dying, whatever, and lots of people land in emergency rooms doing that. And I think that's in the doctor's favors, in the emergency room doctors. I understand they get a lot of people that are repeaters for hypochondriasis. They, everything's something, or med seekers, right? They come in, they want to be they want meds, and they come in. And unfortunately, the older population, especially people who have like loneliness issues, we see this a lot, like in the winter months, they go into the hospital because they get more love, care, and attention, right? So I understand that, but there's also sort of your bell curve mainstream, the people that are in the middle, being able to be assertive in your healthcare and just being able to say, I really want a second opinion. If you're not able to listen to what I need, I really want a second opinion. That's why one of the reasons why I love my primary is that she listens. Like, I just, I'll tell her like really specifically, like, this is what's going on. And if she says this or that and I disagree, I'll say, I don't agree. But I also come with different knowledge, right? So
you have credentials.
Right. So, and she will do that. And I think that because of that, that helps me, obviously, because we have this long-term relationship like that. If you don't have that, I think that doctors get frustrated with the Dr. Gould problem, is that people will come in and talk about how they've already diagnosed themselves, which actually, by the way, everybody, when you're advocating for yourself, I always tell my clients, don't go in and tell someone your diagnosis that you think it is. Go in and just give them the symptoms that you're having and that you've been having and how long, and in detail, so they can figure out the puzzle, because that's what they're trained to do. If you go in and you bias with the information right out of the gate, you're going to, the doctor may miss something because you just went in with, I have this. And then they go, that's now, it's human nature. They are human just because they're doctors, and you'll get pissed off at a doctor because they missed it. Well, or someone will sue them because, but you came in and gave them the bias. And yes, we're trained to blind that out, but we still hear it. That's like saying, something in court and saying, strike that. Don't pay attention to that. That's the only thing you ever think about.
Right.
That's what's there. It's like you come in. So it's like when people say, I want, like, to bring my treatment summary from the last place that I was in, I'm like, do not bring that to me. I don't want it. In 5 or 6 weeks, if you want to get it from me, then I always like to take the person for what I see them coming in. And I learned that a long time ago. And this was a way long time ago in my beginning of my career. I learned that I would get treatment summaries, and I would see things like, persons, and this would, persons obese has, and the obese word would stand out to me because in my mind, I quickly went to what that would look like. And that and they were coming for weight management, and they were coming for health, lifestyle, coaching, nutrition, things like that, blah, blah, blah. They'd walk in and I'm like, where's the obese person?
Yeah.
But they would write that in the note because the weight and the BMI index said that, but actually the person was not this visual. So it came with this piece of information that biased me right out of the gate, because I was thinking, and I was able to turn on a dime being like, oh, okay. But then I learned over time that I would start seeing other things like personality disorder. Person has strong personality, but they would be diagnosed or having a rule out with the, of like potential features of this personality disorder. Some people obviously would come with that. But when you put that in a note or a treatment summary and you see that, you go, oh boy, right? Yeah. Because but it would be that the person had advocacy skills, or they were assertive, or I didn't find them to be the same way as someone else did. Diagnostically. And so I would look at those things and scrutinize them for the client. From my end, the client wouldn't know I was doing it, but to make sure that I was making sure I didn't miss something, making sure that if they did have a personality disorder underlying some of their actual mental health issue, that I was making sure I was addressing it. And if not, I would address it with them that, do you realize in your note that your note says this? Do you realize that this is what they were saying? Do you realize why that is? And more often than not, it was more like a 50-50 split, like that it would come in that a person wasn't those things, or if they were, it was because they were advocating for themselves. Right. And they were listed as being histrionic, which means more dramatic or more over the top, because they were able to describe more. And I didn't find them that way. Or narcissistic, because they advocated, and I could see it. You could tell it's like, oh, this person's an advocate for themselves. They assert. So therefore that was really quickly written off as narcissist. And with no diagnostic, because the medical doctor didn't go through the list of features that make up those personality disorders. They just
Well,
were
the
like,
medical doctor seen him for 8 minutes and 3
Right,
visits. So
right,
how
and
can they
said-
reach that diagnosis?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So I'm like, this. So
And in stressful periods, probably
Mhm.
too.
when people are much more, intense, right?
Mhm.
So it kind of goes to me with my veterinary care last year with Mush, right?
Yeah.
And you probably will remember this, but if you don't, it's the same thing. I went in to the place that I go to that I love, not my regular vet normal day, but my one that takes care of all the emergencies and took care of Mush last year before he passed, and went in for triage. And the triage nurse, and I remember me telling you this, that I ended up having to, I was like, it was funny because I thought the staff thought I was going to implode because I said how I was speaking now in terms of like, this is what's going on with him. That triage nurse she rolled her eyes at me. And that was like, I thought John was going to go into cataplexy because he saw the eye roll and he was like, Kim's going to lose her shit.
Yep.
Right. Because I was not telling the diagnosis. I was saying, here's what's happening. And when I would say what was happening, she would change my words and try to say it was this. And I'd be like, no, that's not what I'm saying. And I would keep coming back. And so she finally, that's when she sort of threw her pen down because she was annoyed because I was not agreeing to what she wanted to have it be.
Right.
And I was saying, that is not what this is. And so I ended up walking out of the room, going to the front desk who knows me really well and said, I do not want to talk to her anymore. I wanted to speak to someone else because this is what she did. And then I got a call, like, because I advocated, I got a call and I got like, and I said, she's not a good front line person, like, and that makes me wonder how good a caregiver she is too. That's a concern because she wasn't able to do that. So I think that advocating would be I'm sure in her note that I was annoying and bitchy, but even though John's getting picked on here today, John would say that I wasn't. I held just, you just rolled your eyes at me. Like, you just rolled your eyes at me. Like, who does that?
Yeah.
And not taking
that's
me seriously.
an approach difference.
Right.
That just invites conflict. It doesn't invite discussion.
Right. And so I didn't go into conflict with her. I went into, I'm just going to advocate in a different way, because once the eye roll came, I knew she was off my radar in terms of being able to help.
Yep.
Because that was, and then when the next person came in, I was like, I just got my eyes rolled at. So I'm just letting you know that if that's, where we're at, I just need, and the next person was great and it was fine and it worked out. But it's if you don't have the bravery or the courage. And I remember growing up not having the bravery and courage to do all that, because it was very much taught that, yeah, you speak up, but, well, as you know, in my household, you speak up, but if it was against what anyone said, then you shouldn't speak up. So it was always that conflict. And that's where a lot of people sit, is you're taught socially or you're taught familially that, yay, yes, advocate, but don't do it against me.
Yeah.
Do it against that, but don't do it against me,
right,
because that goes against what I want. So, and it took me, and it takes that. I mean, a lot of clients come to me for this thing, is like, I don't have self-confidence. I don't have courage. I don't have the ability to stand up for myself. And therefore my ability to maintain a relationship, create a relationship, do whatever it is relationally gets stuck, because my ability to say no is a full sentence with a period. I mean, it takes people a long time. I always say it took me till I was 36 to get this. And it's a lifelong practice now, and I'm not 36 anymore. But it took me with awareness all the way up till I was 36 to be like, enough.
Right.
Enough. And it was a trial and error. And finally it was like, no is no. And I'm not doing that. And there's ways to be heard. So how do you get heard? It's about being emotionally aware, being emotionally intelligent. That means read your audience. know if you're going to have a person that's going to be combative. Know that if that's the case, that doesn't mean you don't speak. It means that you say, I just want to let you know I see it this way.
Yeah.
I just want you to know that my facts or my experiences, that this is how I saw the situation, and I'd like to get it to resolve out better. Using words, obviously, I statements, it's very, they get, the psychobabble, people go, oh, it's all the psychobabble cliche stuff. I statements work way better than you. Here's what my clients do a lot of times, and people in I know in general. I believe that you, I feel that you, I think that you.
Mhm.
That's not an I statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is my experience that my feelings got hurt when you said this. That is an I statement, because you're saying something got said and it hurt my feelings. Not, I think that you're a jerk. I mean, sometimes that happens, right?
Yeah.
I could, right? But usually when you get to that point and you're getting into that, some people are right there at the beginning because they're just there. But at that point, it's because you're not getting heard. If you're into the space of you're just being a jerk or you're just being an ass, because you're not getting heard.
Right.
And heard doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything. It means that you have to find a solution because you hurt someone's feelings or you crossed their boundary and invalidated their experience. Doesn't mean that just because you didn't have the experience doesn't mean that they didn't. Right. So if I had an experience and you didn't have it, doesn't mean that I'm wrong. And it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It doesn't mean that. It just means that I still had what my experience is and was, and I don't like the way it made me feel. So being able to say, it's such an important thing. I just watched some of this happen recently in a particular environment where people were trying to advocate for themselves as a group and as individuals, like both at the same time. And the powerful person that they were trying to do that with, I was not there and present. This is all hearsay from people talking about it, was really hard for me to hear because I so badly just wanted to be able to coach the situation of being able to say, because people feel so disempowered and disenfranchised when they're trying to speak up as a whole, as a group, and also as individuals, and being shut down by one person because there's a power differential.
Right.
And people ask, well, what do we do? And, I always say, advocate, go up your chain, go to the advocacy spaces where you can. But even in those particular cases, it doesn't always work. And so what do? You find how to emotionally, physically, whatever it is, protect yourself. And sometimes that means that, unfortunately, you have to just do the thing that you don't want to do to get what you need, because you know that the pushback isn't going to help you.
Is this an HOA?
No. Oh, that's another good example. Yes. That HOA has been working itself out. There hasn't, I think there's still problems there, but nothing like there were.
No, but that's the dynamic. That's an HOA dynamic right there.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is like that you have a person in power. Well, it's perceptive power, right? Because, and if you have someone that is going to utilize that because that gives them a sense of self-worth, and they wield it at people because they can, and they don't get any reprimand for it, then that's where it becomes hard in the advocacy spaces, whether it's, and that's including that's relationships, couples, that's in healthcare, that's in schools, that's in, it's in so many places, because that power differential makes such a difference in being able to advocate for yourself. Because when you do and you feel like you're shot down, then you get, people will just diffuse the responsibility out and just be like, I'm not saying a word, and just push it away from themselves. And then nothing changes, unfortunately, for the situation. And I think that I still encourage people, even in those situations, you still advocate for yourself. I was in a situation this is now right pandemic-y time, like in the year, like right into, I think 19 into 20, I was on a board, and I'd been on this board for quite some time, and the insane toxicity in the board was so unruly, of what I call fantasy power, that it was so much better for me to not bother to advocate and just, extract myself from it and just be like, at the end of the day, life is very short, and I'm not going to fight to stay on this board to fight people that have no ability to do this Goldilocks space.
Yep.
And it was so unhealthy. It was making me feel sick.
But that's an important skill set to learn.
Yeah.
Those points those relationships that are unrecoverable in that regard.
Yes.
Just eliminate them.
Yeah. And I think that's hard for people, because people feel like, and we are taught that, especially like family, you don't get rid of anyone. You don't extract them from your life. You don't, you allow people to shit all over you, even because they have a title. And that is not true. And I think that, unfortunately there are a lot of people out there that I get from, they've come from other practitioners, and they come and they say, well, I ask always, why did you leave, or what wasn't working? And then a lot of times people say they wanted me to forgive someone that I didn't want to forgive. Like, that's not our job, is to make someone forgive somebody. And I have, like, people that I was talking about earlier have written books on like particular things like forgiveness. Forgiveness it's a hard concept in terms of advocacy piece, because forgiveness often implies, there's so many words it implies, right?
It implies an act for the other person when it's an act for yourself. Right.
And people don't understand what it is for the act for yourself, right? What that means. It's forgiveness of self. Like, when kids have been abused, forgive oneself. That means some people are like, I didn't do anything wrong. Right. You're forgiving yourself for being a child, not knowing any different or having any outlets. So I try not to use that word forgiveness. I say, give yourself grace or permission to walk away from people who have not done right by you.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's not about saying, I forgive you for being a total piece of crap to me. No, it's about, I give myself permission to not be around you and not have to tolerate your crap anymore. And people have a really hard time with that, especially in like,
I give myself permission not to be tortured by this anymore.
Well, that too. And I think, and that's a process. So when you're doing a self-advocacy thing internally, right? That's an internal self-worth advocacy. You give yourself agency, a belief of efficacy, of being able to say, I will not tolerate you stepping on my boundaries and aggressing at me. You're not being assertive. You're being aggressive. You're trying to control me. You're trying to shape what happens here by yelling, screaming, name calling, putting down, belittling, condescending, abandoning, being conditional, all these things, under the auspice of, you're my mother, my father, my aunt, my uncle, my grandparent, my sister, my brother, my spouse. Just because there's a title there, I tell people have to earn the title. Mm-hmm. If they are not doing behavior worthy of the title, what are you doing? There's that assumption that's often made about, like, well, it's family. Well, family has a responsibility to be respectful, loving, kind, and compassionate. If you don't find them to be those things, you don't have to be with them. Now, that doesn't mean you have to extract them from your life permanently. Some people do. It means you have to learn how to advocate for yourself and also negotiate the territory that you're in and manage it if you want to be around it, knowing that you cannot change those people. If you know you can't change them, because you can't, and they don't see the issue and they see you as the problem, you have to decide your limits. That's your decision, not my decision. I've had people come into my practice in the past. I have one woman who came in 8 years ago now, and she was very close to her family. I won't disclose too much because she may be listening, but, and also that's not a thing, but, in that interim period of like these 8 years, she was with them. Then she was totally out from them. She extracted them completely because it got so toxic.
Yeah.
And then it was not me saying, no, you can't be. It was me saying every week or every other week, what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want? And finally, she's figured out how to put herself back in to the space with negotiation spaces for herself of how to know when to step it back and to step in and to be able to tolerate and see when she knows that it's not healthy, when she knows that it's feeling bad for her, when she knows that it's not going to go well, she knows how to extract. Did we get a comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Setting boundaries is what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes. So hi, Janet. Thank you for joining. I advise people to set boundaries when they have to be around toxic or abusive people at work or in family situations that they can't avoid being around. Yes. So boundaries, and so interesting. And let's see, maybe Janet will agree with this. If she has had to set boundaries, a lot of times people think setting boundaries is a mean thing. You're being mean, right? Setting boundaries doesn't necessarily have to be something like out in the world, like I'm setting a boundary on you, right? It's more about something internal that you just know, when I go into this, I'm going into this family party this weekend, blah, 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 right? I know that if it goes well, I'm going to go at 1, leave at 4. If it starts going poorly, I'm leaving at 2. Right. So you have your own boundary of where you're going to be able to do that. Then you also have the external boundary of when someone's doing something, you can say, and being able to advocate for yourself and say, I don't like how you're speaking to me. I don't like the way that makes me feel. Do you realize how that impacted me? Like, you can do that. And that's setting a boundary. Also, I mean, saying things like, I'm using some personal experiences, like back in the day, my grandmother used to have a boundary for certain people in my family of do not call me after 10 p.m. at night.
Yeah.
And there was one particular person in our family that would call her at 9:59. So she just wouldn't answer.
Yeah.
Because it got to the point where it was like her boundary, if she'd said 9,
That's
it would
aggressive.
have been 8:59.
Yeah.
Right. This person was so passive aggressive about it. And then her whole point was, and she explained it to this person, if you call me that late, you make me rev up and then I can't sleep because you get me so upset. So, but that person was not able to regulate around that. So the calls needed to, if they were going to happen, they had to happen earlier. And I loved my grandmother for setting that, because that was part of my 36-year process of being able to come to, she would just be like, set the boundary. And I was one that could call after 10 because I was not a rever upper, but she put it out there as a generic thing of like, no after 10 o'clock calls. Because certain family members just would call and rev her up. And she'd call me at like 11:30 being like, do you want to know who I was just talking to? And you want to know how much stress I'm under now?
This is something that has to happen early. Like you were talking about learning at 36. Most of the lessons I learned in my 50s. It was like, I needed to learn this earlier because at a certain point in age, you get really stingy about your mental energy. Right. And that's where the boundaries start coming up. And hopefully as you get a little older, you don't care what the consequences are. I have to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it would be great if people that, and this is one of the things that I work on in my practice and is with people, is that they want to learn this. I love it when people are in their 20s and 30s come in. I'm like, oh, you're getting this early. So you're not in your 50s doing this, because I really have to let go of my ability to change this or make it different, or you work so hard because you become, I call it being a hopeaholic. Yeah. I tell my clients, you're hopeaholicing, you're being a hopeaholic. You're in the codependency. That's what it is. It's part of the addiction of relationship, right? It's a really unhealthy relationship and you're in the toxicity of it and you have to extract yourself. And by extracting doesn't necessarily mean like for some people they can't leave the house or whatever, but it's by saying, until you treat me better, you're not getting anything from me. I'm a stone, right?
But you modify your approach to people. Certain pans on the stove are hot. You treat them differently. That's the way you should do it. And not
treating them differently by like, if the stove is hot and it's controversial, right? It doesn't mean that you avoid them. Right. It means you just address them in a healthier way for you.
Doing it in a way that works.
There's still going to be a hot stove. Like the stove is going to be on. It's going to be flaming. It's going to be doing that. But you don't have to put your hand on it. Right. You could still be in the kitchen, but you don't have to put your hand on it, right? Yeah. And so, and I think to Janet's point too, is she just said it's empowering for victims to not have to continue avoiding the people. You're not avoiding the people, right? You don't have to avoid them. You're managing the context of the situation. And then, hi, Kathy. I found setting boundaries for me was difficult for me earlier in life, but getting much easier in my 50s. Yes. So, and that's really common. it's like remember a couple shows ago, I was like, this is a day where I've decided, I realized where like, I just don't care.
Yeah.
Remember I said, I came in, I'm like, I just don't care anymore. I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, I'm at that point where it's like, oh, you think that of me? I don't care.
Your teens, 20s, 30s, you care what everybody thinks about
right.
you.
And it's like, but I progressively, I think from my 36 have been getting there, but now it's just like, I've had these moments where I'm like, you know what, really? I really don't care.
Yeah.
And I don't care. But I that's a big thing in my practice. All my years, and I'm almost 30 years in, of people really so struggling coming in their 50s, just starting therapy, or 55, 60, and being like, I just can't say no, or I just haven't been able to set a boundary, or when I do, I don't keep it because I feel bad that I've hurt someone's feelings because now they don't like me, or they're upset with me, or I perceive. And they've been struggling this with their whole lives. And I mean, that's how I grew up. I grew up with, you know, being, sure. I was blatantly, overtly taught that, you know, just suck it up, right? You know, that's just the way it is. And you don't have to live like that. And you don't have to live like that until you're in your 50s and 60s. You can do this boundary setting in the early. And
we're taught social conformity as we're being raised,
and social conformity and familial conformity of like, you know, accept your lot because they're family. And I think that's such a bullshit psychological maneuver, gaslight on a person about just because they're your family and they have a title doesn't give them any entitlement. And if they don't earn it, they're out. And, you know, if you have a parent or you have someone that's been egregious towards you or done something, and then they feel it's your job to be the person who has to repair or conform or comply, run.
Yeah.
Run, Forrest, run. You don't have to do that. But we're taught that, well, you're supposed to, because what will happen? I get this a lot. Well, what will happen if, you know, the person dies and you have regrets? Well, that will be my issue.
Yeah.
Right. That will be my issue if it is my issue, but it might not be my issue because I might be resolved out in the fact, or I might be able to teach you that you could not have, you know, if you've exhausted, like I was just talking about that client that came in, was in yucky, then got out, then got back in. She now feels like she has done all that she could do to ever make it right. So no matter what happens, she's good. And she's in her 40s. So we started in her late 30s and now she's in her 40s. And so she got this in her late 30s, early 40s, where she's come to that space and it's really solid for her. Whereas, you know, you get people that are like, you know, like Kathy's saying, like it took her into her 50s, you know, that it's like, you have to, you know, either you have to get to a point where you don't care, which is hard.
Yep.
Because you get the hopeaholic in you. Like, well, I hope that they'll change. I hope that they'll come around. If they haven't come around in 1 year, they're not coming around in 10. They're not coming around in 20.
Well, it's really as absolute as I don't care, right? It's an equation.
Right.
It's balancing your own interests against how much you care about what the other person thinks.
Right. And I think, and so in keeping with what I said at the beginning, it's like, yes, you could have assertiveness because you do care about what the other person thinks if it's, you know, like if you're working together.
Yeah.
But if it's what the other person thinks is trying to override what you think, or you're trying to override what they think, this is a bad thing because you're always competing, and you're always competing for nothing because there is no win. There is no goal. There is no end goal here. The goalpost keeps moving because we don't have a shared interest of mutual respect. We don't have a shared interest of love, kindness, and compassion. And I am big on this lately about just have some grace, give some room to have some grace to be like, if you're hurting someone or you know that that's happening, then do something to change that. And if you don't, if you're that person that's hurting someone and the person's telling you and you don't change that, then you as the person have to put up the boundary of like, I will not tolerate this anymore and I'm out.
Doesn't this go back to the show a couple weeks ago? Isn't there acceptance involved here? You have to accept who the people are.
You have to accept that, and you have to accept like where you are with them and what.
And not accept it like.
No, not like
fall prey to their to their behavior, but accept the fact that they aren't going to change.
Exactly.
And modify your approach of,
right. And that doesn't mean you have to, and your modification doesn't mean, and people will say this to me all the time about like, well, but I live with them. What do I do? It's like, well, you can still modify it. You just don't have to engage them. You don't have to you don't have to be all lovey-dovey. You don't have to like comply to their wishes. You don't have to just hop to, and the people will be like, wow, but I live with them. Well, okay. And I have so many couples in the past decade that have not divorced, but they live in the same house, but they live separately because for other reasons, right? Financial and other things, but they live separate lives because they just never could get their shit together to get it together because they're so different in their way of not coming together with mutual respect. And they do better as friends, but they really don't. I have a couple couples that just they don't really even talk. They just share the expenses and they just come and go. Now, I don't think that's the best thing in all cases, but it's working for some people. It's like that nesting thing. It's like people stay and, the kids leave. They realize after 18 years, 20 years that, they're gone to college. They don't have anything in common. So they're, for financial reasons and other reasons, they're just going to stay together, but they don't really have anything together. A lot of people are doing that. But it's also because they have nothing, they can't get along because they have different goals. They have different ideas, they have different ways of being in the world, and they're dissatisfied with each other for whatever reason, and so they set those boundaries in that way. So there's different ways of doing that and managing it, and whatever works for you, as long as it's healthy and it's working for you, then yay, right? And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. It doesn't have. That's why I'm saying, like, people are like, oh, you have to be there because they're family. No, you don't. No, you don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's a disservice when I hear clinicians tell people like, well, you have to forgive them. First of all, I never tell people you have to do anything. People will ask me, well, what should I do? I will say, I can't tell you what to do. I can give you 3 or 4 options of what I see is possible, but then you have to choose what's right for you. But there's never, there's never that. And I
but often people think that means flamethrower, and it doesn't have to be that way either.
No, there's all kinds of, there's a spectrum. That's why the Goldilocks space in assertiveness is really key here. And if you guys don't know what that is, you certainly can look it up, but it's the middle ground. It's finding your middle ground, not the other person's
not too hot,
ground.
not too cold.
It's just, being able to manage where you're at and just being like, I love you, but I'm going to love you from a distance, or I don't love you and I'm going to still be distant from you. Yeah. Right. And it's okay to do that. People feel bad that they feel, they have bad feelings like, oh, that's so bad to feel that way. No, it's not. But you have to be able to accept where you are at and give yourself permission to set that boundary for yourself so that you don't fall prey to, like, to Janet's comment where she was talking about being empowering to victims, right? It's very empowering to be able to be there and be present with someone else that has pushed you or has given you emotional toxicity in your life, and sit with that in a room and just be like, it's all good.
Yeah.
And
because I know I'm leaving this room.
Well, and I know I'm leaving this room, and I know I don't have to be back in this room. And it is what it is. I mean, there's so many, and I think that there's so many important boundaries that you have to make in your own head around things you're willing to do and not do. Anticipatory anxiety about being in rooms with people that are pushing, we're coming into holiday season. Here it comes, right? Here we go. And being able to sit with that, or just being, that's why people love COVID. There was a reason. There were actual good things about COVID that people loved, because if you guys remember some of my shows, people were like dancing that they didn't have to have family dinners for holidays. And they were like, oh, it's over. I have to go back to that. And I would be like, no, you don't. People have shifted. You can say, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do that. So I think it's important to have the internal boundaries for yourself of, hey, I'm not going to respond to certain things. I'm not going to, be present for your stuff if you're going to treat me like that, or you're going to behave like that. If we go back to the healthcare thing, it's about, I need you to hear me. I need to be, if you remember last year, I did a show probably right around this time about being seen, soothed, safe, and secure. As children, we are hopefully raised with being seen, which means also being heard, validated, soothed, comforted, right? In all aspects, safe and secure emotionally and in other ways. So many people are not given that. And so they become us as adults. And then we struggle with the ability to set boundaries because we're looking to get our 4 S's met.
Yeah.
We're looking to be seen. We're looking to be soothed. We're looking for that safety. We're looking to be loved. And we don't get that grace, but we often will give it, but we won't get it back. And we struggle and hopeaholic it to death to get it from the people that just aren't going to give it to us, and hope that someday they'll see and they'll love us and in all the ways that we deserve. It's not going to come from those people. And it's in that acceptance of, you're not going to get it from those people, but you're going to get it from, people that, come into your life when you're in your late 40s. And I'm saying that specifically for people that are listening. They come into your life in your late 40s and they become your family. They become your go-to. They become your love, and they give you all the things that you didn't get because they see you. They soothe you. They, have safety, and they're all those yummies for you. And then the other people, you just have to be able to say, mm-mm. And it's okay to just be like, it's okay. And that's not your issue if they don't like that. But people make it their issue. And that's what the hard thing is about when you're doing boundaries, is that it's very empowering once you let go of feeling bad that person might be upset, that they didn't care yesterday when they made you upset, and they haven't cared for the past 30 years when they made you upset. But now you're so worried about them. Yeah. Come on. Like, give yourself the permission to release, run, Forrest, run. Right. I think it's, not going into too much personal detail, but I think it's been, it's interesting when I share a couple personal stories with people about, like, some of the things that have happened in my life, where I've had to put boundaries down and just be like, I'm out. It's the relief is so amazing off of my heart and mind. And people always say this. I don't think I have people that are not in my tight circle. Those are all fine. But outside that, the extraneous people, like, but it's your family, it's your mother, it's your father, it's your brother. I'm just using people in general, so it's not specific here. And I'm like,
Well, family means different things to different people, right, depending on how your family was. Right.
My best family is the ones I've picked.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my right. And that's not for everybody, but that's just in my experience. And I have family members that I have that are people I would pick. So, so I have people that are in my family that I wouldn't pick. And then I have people that are in my family that I would absolutely pick. And they're probably listening today, and I love them. And, and one of them's my lovely Wheaton niece that's going to Wheaton, and her family, and they're my loves in my life.
And she'll be able to advocate.
I will just tell you, as before we leave the show today, that girl has no problem advocating for herself. She grew up around her mom and me as strong women with advocacy skills, and she has no problem advocating for herself. She will have no issue. I do not worry about her one iota, and I'm so glad, because she's not even 20 yet, and I think she's got it. And we talk about that to the point where sometimes we're like, girl, you need to roll that back. So she's in the process of, doing that. But she's one young woman that I am definitely not worried about her advocacy skills. She might not always get what she wants, but she will definitely fight, and she will advocate in a healthy way. And she does. And it has worked in her favor. Hence some of the reason why she's gotten where she's gotten. Yep. So, and proud auntie, for that. So anyway, very empowering. It makes me feel good. So anyway, so thank you all for joining, all the people that I can see, all the people that will be on later, and all the other things. I appreciate that. And I will be here sometime next week, because Lou's going away, but we're going to figure out what day the show is, and I will be back. So you guys have a fantastic week, and thank you. Go out and advocate for yourselves, or help people advocate for themselves, and give people grace and permission to be kind, loving, and considerate. Mwah.